Welcome back everybody, and today we're going to be continuing looking at assembling models from both the Command Edition and Recruit Edition of the starter sets, including the Necrons and the Space Marines. And we're going to start with the HQ units. And so the first one here is the Overlord, the big cheese of the Necron army, and we have some instructions for putting him together. And we're just going to look over how we actually assemble him, as it's slightly fiddly in part, so we'll have a little bit of a go at putting the model together. I've gone to the trouble of taking everything off and trimming it down as required, removing any of the mold lines. And first things first is the body and the spine and the actual weapon there connect together. Now all of these parts, I've actually trimmed down all of the little projections that go into the sockets there, because they tend to be a little bit too tight a fit and you can't get them to insert very well. So I kind of preemptively cleaned all them down to ensure that assembly was a little bit easier. I am going to actually glue these, but obviously it's all press fit and it's designed to be done without glue. But as it turns out, I tried or chose to do that regardless. So once you've got the arm attached to the sub arm, the next bit is actually attaching the head to the torso, and he kind of shoves his neck in through his shoulder blades, and then you rotate to fit the ball into the socket of the shoulder, and then his face attaches to the back of his skull, and that presses in, sort of holds tight, and then that can be glued in place. And once you've got those two parts, then you can choose to put them together, or you can then attach his the lower part of his arm. So he's got a forefinger and thumb, and that attaches to the other three fingers and presses on with a little tab, and that attaches his tachyon arrow to his arm. And for some reason all these guys are right-handed. Don't know why that is. And therefore we have effectively two parts left to assemble, and it's just a matter again of lining this up. And the cable, which looks like a power cable, it goes into a socket in the back of his shoulder blade. I found it easier to ensure that that was placed first. It helps to align the model, and then you can push the two pieces together and keep note of watching how the shoulder armor comes together. That's a good indication if it's actually going together properly, because it should close up relatively well enough to actually glue it. And then finally there is a cable that attaches to his mid arm, and that just needs to be pressed in. And once that's actually all aligned in place, it's good to go. And there we have one complete Necron Overlord. It looks quite good. Obviously still needs to be based, painted, etc. But that gives us an idea of how we assemble him. He has been glued to ensure he is going to be a bit more durable when being handled. Next cab off the rank is the top dog of the Super Marines. This is the captain. And we can see that we've got a few options with the captain with regards to how many heads we can put on him, and also the bases. So we can have a bit of a diorama, or we can just leave it somewhat plain. And in this instance here, we're just going to use part of that diorama. So we'll just have a look here at the sprue, and we can see there's quite a few bits in comparison to the Necron. And so there's a little bit more cutting and trimming required to get it ready. And here's all our bits and pieces laid out, but we won't be using some of those, so we can take the bits that we don't need, the multiple heads and parts of the base, and we'll start by grabbing the front of the body, the back of the body, and then the head which we've chosen. There are three heads, one with an exposed face, one with a visor down, and one with a visor up. Now you need to place the head in the model, and there's a little cutout that sits over that little stud, and it's just a matter of fiddly pushing that together. Again, all of those little dowels have been trimmed down to ensure that they do press together better. You can clearly see that with a little bit of a squeeze you're able to remove most of the gap between the two parts to ensure that it is a neat fit, because it looks a lot better clearly that way. So I would highly recommend that you do trim them down, which I did in a previous video. Now he's got a nice little shield which just presses into his chest, relatively straightforward, and you can see when it's pushed all the way home looking at the side projection. And then after that we can now start to play with his arms. His right arm has his sword, and that just sockets on relatively straightforward, sort of in about a 45-degree angle facing forward. And then his left arm actually is holding the shield, so it comes in a couple of parts. So he's missing his hand, and it's a matter of just aligning that, and it actually has a bit of a sort of a bevel socket that you can see from above. So if you have a look closely, you can see when it's actually aligned with his shoulder. And once you've got that set in place, then we can just, for simplicity, we'll place him on his base. There is a peg and also a little sort of projection under his right foot that aligns in there, and then we're in position to apply the shield, because the shield actually sits down adjacent to his left foot. So the shield comes in two parts. We've got a little skelly dude that has to be squished on as part of the decoration of his shield, so just squeeze it together, and then it's a matter of lining that up with the peg on his arm. And so at the moment he's a bit of a peg leg, but apparently I've decided I'm going to put the backpack on. Now with the backpack, again, trim that down, and depending upon when the arms are situated, the pauldrons actually interfere with the backpack, so it doesn't go all the way on, I noticed. So push it on as far as you can, and then you'll have interference with the shoulder joints. So it's just a matter of getting everything quite right. The arm is currently slightly too high, but when we push the shield on and get the wrist, so to speak, joined up from above, the shield should actually sit flat on the ground. So you just have to sort of tweak the arm, and that gives you a complete model. And he's looking rather fancy, I must add. So quite happy with the way he looks, and it should be quite nice to get going with him. Now we're going with the lesser HQ units, which you get in the recruit box, which is the first of the starter sets, and this is the lieutenant / lieutenant, and he comes with a Neo-Volkite pistol and his mastercrafted power sword. Relatively straightforward how to assemble him. We've cut to the chase and gone straight with the let's just assemble him and have a look at him. The model is much more detailed than the standard assault intercessor. He's adorned with much more purity seals and dangly keys and locks, and he comes with a halo and various other embellishments all over the armor, lots of little skulls, so a fair bit of detail, which obviously separates the two. According to the paintings, comes with a GT stripe down the middle of his head, so look forward to painting that. Compared to the standard Necron warriors, the Royal Warden is equipped with a Relic Gauss blaster, which is a double-barreled weapon, and he can shoot twice with that, as opposed to the single shot from either the Gauss Flayer or the Gauss Reaper that the Necron warriors are given. So he's a slightly different looking model than the standard Necrons. He's got a little bit more embellishment as well. The armor looks a little bit more detailed around the collarbones. He's got a couple of horns sticking out of his back, and he has a bit of a cape. So he does stand out a little bit relative to the standard cannon fodder, which makes him look kind of interesting. So that effectively sums up the overlook of the HQ models that both come in the Command / Elite Edition, which is the Primaris Captain and the Necron Overlord, and the Royal Warden and the Primaris Lieutenant that come out of the Recruit starter box. And just a quick summary of those guys to see how they get put together and what they look like. And I thank everyone for joining me on this journey of discovery as we go through an introduction into the Warhammer hobby and what it's like to deal with assembly. and hopefully we'll be able to continue with this, and we'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.